Welcome back. We are this week going to pick up our conversation that we had started last week. It was an ongoing conversation. So we're going to jump right into it. And here is part 2 of hormones. So the menstrual cycle is regulated by just this like complex interaction of that LH, that luteinizing hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone, the FSH, and then estrogen and progesterone. Mm-hmm. So the cycle has 3 phases. So when it starts, like we said, day 1, when you start bleeding, is the first day of the follicular phase. Just gonna get worse. So when it starts, estrogen and progesterone are low. The top layers of the thickening of the uterus, that endometrium, start to break down and shed, so you start bleeding, which means your estrogen is low, so you have worse ADHD symptoms. Like maybe if you're having a hard time when you're PMSing and at the start of your period, there's a reason why it's worse. I know personally, I have really intense fatigue and brain fog. Mm-hmm. Right before my period and right at the start of my period, where I just feel dead. So about this time, that FSH starts increasing slightly, which then stimulates the development of follicles in the ovary. So each follicle contains an egg, and then later in the phase, as that FSH level decreases, usually just one follicle is going to continue to develop. And then that follicle itself produces estrogen, and then your estrogen levels start increasing. So obviously, as we know that estrogen increasing, ADHD symptoms are then going to decrease. So then you start the ovulatory phase.
Okay, so when your FSH is increasing and spawning this follicle production, are you still bleeding?
I'm going to say that's probably towards the end of your period.
Okay. That makes sense.
I think that's probably like later in the follicular phase.
Like that's what's causing your bleeding to stop.
Right. Is that this
FSH
is picking up.
Okay. That makes sense.
And the follicles are starting to develop.
I'll allow it.
You can continue. I'm comfortable with that information. So then you've got this follicle that's producing estrogen. Your estrogen levels are steadily increasing. And then your ADHD symptoms are going to improve post-period. Makes sense. So then your ovulatory
And this phase. Is all, sorry, this is all assuming that you're not, these rules are for assuming there's no medication, no ADHD medication also involved.
I didn't look at this with the lens of ADHD medication. I'm looking at this purely from like hormone impacting ADHD.
Gotcha.
But estrogen, they found, does help the efficacy of stimulants.
Okay.
It's the progesterone and the low estrogen that are the nukes.
Gotcha.
To the meds.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So the ovulatory phase starts. There's a surge of the LH. And the FSH levels start rising. That luteinizing hormone then stimulates the egg to release, which is the actual process of ovulation. Usually occurs like 16 to 32 hours after that surge begins.
The opening scene of Look Who's Talking.
Yes. Yeah. Then the estrogen levels decrease during the surge and progesterone levels start to increase. So maybe ovulation day is like not great for your ADHD.
Right.
You may have a couple of rough days around ovulation.
And when you're ovulating, you also are producing more mucosa discharge. Mm-hmm. Just
to help that, to help the egg.
Yeah.
And, you know, we know progesterone is then going to diminish any benefits of the estrogen on the brain and reduce the stimulant efficacy, which we were just talking about. So then you go into the luteal phase. So the LH and FSH decrease, the ruptured follicle that had released the egg closes, and and forms a corpus luteum, which produces progesterone. So during most of this phase, your estrogen levels are high.
Okay.
And then the progesterone and the estrogen are going to cause the lining of the uterus to thicken and prepare for possible fertilization.
Yeah.
Obviously, if the egg is not fertilized, that corpus luteum degenerates. It doesn't produce any more progesterone. Your estrogen levels are going to come down.
Oh, so that follicle is what helps the fertilized egg stay latched?
No, the follicle is just releasing the egg, but then what's left of the follicle is producing progesterone.
Right, but I mean, like, if the egg is fertilized, it'll stay there through pregnancy producing progesterone? Sorry.
No, it's just the sac that it was in, that little follicle that was holding it. That's what's releasing the progesterone. The egg is just doing its own thing, traveling.
Right, that's what I mean.
Being released.
But you said, so the sac
Yep.
becomes the corpus luteum.
Yep. Yep. Yep, that sac.
Corpus Malibuti. And
Yep.
and that sac will produce progesterone
Yep.
during the luteal phase.
Yep.
If the egg is fertilized, that sac continues to produce progesterone?
I'm not sure.
Okay. It's irrelevant. I was
Wait,
just
let me
wondering.
do this next part because that might cover it.
Okay.
It's just talking about that. If the egg is not fertilized, the corpus luteum degenerates and no longer produces progesterone.
Okay.
Then estrogen levels decrease, the top layer of the lining breaks down and sheds, we start the period, and a new cycle begins. I'm not sure, but we're going to talk about pregnancy, so that might cover that question.
Next week?
Yes.
Okay. Tune in next week to hear the answer to my question.
If we remember, which we probably won't. So obviously, like, this is just going through that, like, that's a complicated process of a lot of moving parts that occurs from, like, your preteens until your 50s.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing, like, every time we do this, and, like, we do this, like, science-heavy research for this podcast, like, I'm so glad I bombarded you with the question to start this, but every time we do this science-heavy research, it still just, like, completely blows my mind that humans even exist.
I know.
Because there's so much happening in every single person that you see.
Yeah.
That is just so much more than just, like, breathing and making sure that you eat 3 times a day.
Pooping.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes pooping your pants.
Sometimes pooping your pants,
Just
especially if you have ADHD. Oh my God.
But
yeah, it is
so
amazing.
wild.
Like, and you think about it, like, especially doing this hormone research, I'm like, man, like, over the course of a lifetime, all the chain of things that happens is just, like, it is complicated, but also amazing that your body just knows to do those things.
Yes.
Blows my mind.
Or does them out of spite, which I feel like sometimes that's more of what my body is doing.
I would say my PMS generally feels like it's out of spite. Like, I try and walk it back and be rational.
Do all things through spite, which strengthens me.
Especially PMSing.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
It is crazy.
And then to think, like, all of those little things have to happen, and then you have to have intercourse.
At just the right time.
Right. And with spermies that are just the right amount of fast.
Yep.
To get to where they need to go before the pH of your vagina and uterus, well, kills them.
Yeah.
Because your pH, you're more basic than sperm, or sperm is more basic than the uterus or something. And, like,
it's amazing.
Will kill the sperm. like so many different things have to happen in order for just a positive pregnancy test, let alone
have mercury in microwave in order for all of this to happen.
Well,
Planets
first of
have to
all,
align.
We all know Obama planted microphones in the microwave to spy on us.
Was that with the Green Hill?
Bowling Green Massacre?
Yeah, Bowling Green, that's right. I couldn't remember what the...
It's always crazy when I find a new podcast and then I'm listening to their back catalog and it's like, you can hear the lead up to the 2016 election, and then when this 2016 election happened, and they're all like, we're going to do our best to not have an anxiety episode this week.
We're just all really struggling.
And then you hear them like in the lead up, we're like, okay, 2017, we're all going to show up, blah, blah, blah. It's like you just like the slow marching of drums into 2020.
You're like, let me tell you what the next 6 years are going to look like for you.
Yeah, rough. It's just wild. Like, it's just so weird to hear because it's, imagine if we had podcasts in 2000 and 2001. No. Immediately no, Katie.
Immediately no.
Like, it's just a wild thing to hear. But yeah, with pregnancy and this whole thing, like, it's just, it's the thing where, like Christian fundamentalists will be like, it's a miracle, like, every baby's a miracle. And, like, yes, it is, because look at all these different things that had to happen.
It's like a miracle of evolution. It's
right.
Not a
like,
miracle
you don't have to use it to, force your religion.
I don't have to float into the sky in order for it to be cool.
Yeah, but we will float into the sky if you join our Patreon. So
yes, we will.
If you want to see special tricks.
And we'll puke rainbows at the same time. It's quite a sight.
It's going to be so cool.
And obviously, like, we know, we were talking about, like, with puberty, girls with ADHD tend to have more problems with PMS symptoms, which just, like, feeds this whole disruption that, like, my attitude, and I think something that I realized when I went off the pill, is just, I used to have this attitude when I was, like, a teenager because I didn't get a regular period, so I didn't experience a period a lot. And it really wasn't terrible when I got it, that people were just being dramatic when they were talking about their periods. My periods in my 30s are, like, not trying to be, like, over the top, but are, like, kind of debilitating for a couple of days.
You are debilitated with your period, yeah.
Like, I mean, it's really intense, and it's disrupting to things you have to get done.
What's that company where their slogan is, like, period pain isn't normal?
Oh, I don't know.
And they have all these different products that are, like, almost like China gel or something, but they're specifically designed for people who get periods, regardless of how you identify. And the idea being, like, when your boobs get sore or you feel super bloated, and, like, those symptoms of PMS and having your period that are, like, we've been told that's just how it is. Yeah. And I feel like especially when I was in middle school and I had my period, I was, like, so far into tomboy land that it was almost like I was bucking against the fact that I was having a period.
Yeah, that's true. I felt like I didn't want to
be different. And I didn't see my friends having their periods the way I did. I mean, I was the only one in my class anyway that had their period in 5th grade. And it's not like you all talked about it. Like, we didn't... It would have probably been helpful to have separate health classes through middle school.
Yep.
So that you could have those discussions with your peers. And because I wasn't about to raise my hand with my male health teacher and start asking about, butthole lightning.
As I'm walking to the bathroom with a Maxi pad hidden in my sleeve so no one will possibly know what's going on. Like, it's... And I definitely think, like, I think things are generally improving with, like, the period shame, and I think the conversation is becoming more commonplace, but, I mean, as a kid, there was, everybody thought it was disgusting.
You just feel so out of it, and, like, I mean, God, pads have also come so far compared to what we had, like, holy shit.
Oh, God.
It was, I mean, God, I started out with, like, Maxi pads.
Yeah, it was like sitting on a log.
Thins. Yeah. And,
then it went from my chin to the back of my head. It was huge.
Like the Borat Unitard.
Yes. It's exactly what my Maxi pads look like.
But
and about 3 inches thick.
But then to go to gym class.
Oh.
In middle school and high school where we changed for gym.
Or it gets sweaty.
Yes.
When you have a pad on. Oh.
And, like, basically diaper rash.
Yeah.
Like,
it's the worst.
And the feeling, and I just remember in middle school.
You're like, wait, do I have a yeast infection also at the same time?
Like, in 6th grade, it was like 6th grade orientation, and the PE teachers, like, we went to our separate locker rooms, and the female PE teachers came into the ladies' locker room, and we're like talking about when you have your period, and like basically saying like if you have your period, like exercise is better for your cramps. It'll make you feel better if you do exercise. And basically saying like it's not a fucking excuse.
Yeah.
If you
Hold
have
on,
your
let me
period.
roll my eyes into the back of my head.
Well, and
first.
that's just it. It was the kind of, and so, but then it created more of a shame thing.
Yep.
Where it was like, they don't want to hear that you're
Don't be such a
uncomfortable.
baby back bitch just because you have your period.
Right. Like, I don't want to hear about it. That's not a problem.
Hey, guess what I don't do as an adult with my period? I don't go to the fucking gym because I'm tired and I don't feel good and I don't wanna.
Right. I'll take a walk.
Yes.
I'll absolutely, and take a walk or
I'll do some stretching at
doing
home.
some stretching.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like a straddle stretch on the floor when I'm PMSing or have my period. It feels so good.
Actually, Yoga with Adrienne, I think she actually has a specific, very gentle stretching routine specifically for during your period.
When I had a Peloton app subscription, they also had stuff like that for PMS and like maternity yoga or whatever. And it was just gentle stretching and like just kind of like mindfulness. But the sort of shit that like we don't give ourselves a break for.
Yeah, it's I think I definitely now have a whole new respect for just the whole experience. I respect my period more. I didn't respect it before, and I have a reverence for it now because I mean it's like an amazing process that your body does all of these things. I also have learned now that I spend 2 calendar weeks PMSing leading up to my period. And it's...
My husband's a nice man.
It's rough, man. I am like exhausted. I have a headache. I'm super hungry. My boobs hurt. I've got brain fog. Like can't concentrate. Back and hip pain. And I usually then also feel like I'm getting a head cold.
The low back pain is really what gets me when I'm actually on my period. It's like, it's the feeling of like, I just cannot find a comfortable position to sit in. And usually it's like a day or two before I actually start bleeding.
Yep.
But it's like, because I'm on the pill, so I know it's coming. But it's the thing of like, God, why can't I just get comfortable? And I'll like fidget all day at my desk.
Yep.
And then I get home and I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's why.
I'm going to get my period.
I should have just taken the Tylenol because like,
yes.
It's not that I'm sitting uncomfortably. It's just that my back is in pain.
Yeah.
Because my organs are contracting, which is
I
causing
usually
tension.
describe it as I feel like when I get my period, the first couple days of my period and then like day before, that I'm wearing an inner tube of fire. So like hip pain, back pain, and then like obviously the belly pain that goes with it. It's just like all the way around.
I have found that going to the chiropractor around that time, and especially getting my lower back and hips adjusted is so helpful. It's so critical for me to feel better because then I feel like I can move properly and go for that walk. But plus also I have double jointed hips. So I'll like lay down on the table and I can feel my ankles or my heels are at different spots because one of my hips is just like fully hiked up. Like
Katie's laying on the table looking like Pinocchio.
Like,
2 different.
Like I need a shoe insert because one of my legs is too short. And then she finishes the adjustment and then I've got 2 normal sized legs again. Yeah.
I'm not Eileen anymore.
But it is so helpful just to, and thank God our insurance covers it because otherwise I wouldn't be going.
Yeah, it's usually I know it's at its worst when I think to myself that I just want to fold myself up like a sweater and put myself in a drawer. That's usually the visual in my head. Like my body hurts and I just want to be like curled up. And I mean, I have used sick days for days where I'm like, I can't today. Between the brain fog that I have, the fatigue, and like, I don't know, what's worse? Do I feel like I'm going to throw up or poop my pants or...
I was trying to describe how it felt. I was talking about it with PK at some point when we were dating. Because especially as I've gotten older, I've really noticed how intense my cramps are. And I never felt them really as a kid.
Me neither.
As a teenager. But, and I'd have a little bit of back pain. But again, it was the kind of thing, it's easy enough for me to overlook. It's not crippling back pain or whatever.
Whereas now I'm like, whoa.
Right. And the cramps, like it feels, and so the way I described it to Patrick is like, you know, when you get that feeling and you're like, oh, I need to find a bathroom because I have to poop. And you get that kind of like crampy feeling, and you can like feel it in your colon. And you're like, okay, I know at some point in this day, I'm going to poop.
Yeah.
It may not be, it's not urgent, like you have food poisoning poop.
But it's soon.
But right, like you get that urge.
Pressure.
That you have to go to the bathroom. And it's exactly that same cramping feeling, but in the front half of your body. It's forward instead of backwards, and that's how it feels. So I spend my whole time on my period thinking, do I have to poop? No.
Yeah.
Or the whole time.
Or I know, like when I was a teenager, I would also get like the diarrhea, which I don't get now, but
I don't get that
was
now.
Like awful.
Now I feel like I'm constipated.
I get
for the whole week, and then at the end, like I know it's over with because I can finally go to the bathroom normally.
Yeah, yeah, it's really brutal. Like I definitely
aging is great, guys.
It's different than it was when I was younger, because I do think back and I'm like, no, I definitely was not experiencing.
No.
And again, did not have the context of somebody saying like, as you go through this decades-long period of your life, it's going to change. It's not going to be static. Your period's not going to be the same when you're 14 as it is when you're 34.
Right.
Which is what I was expecting.
I know we'll discuss it next week, but I feel like I'm at this point, I am fully prepared for every single thing I know about my period to change as soon as I have a kid. Like, right, I just assume it'll
do I get my bearings and figure out what's going on? Is it going to change? And that's what I kind of feel like, you know, I really didn't get the full experience with the period because I was on the pill for so long.
Yeah.
And then it has taken me years to figure out, like, and that's years with the lens of paying attention and trying to learn about it, being like, okay, what are my patterns? What am I noticing? Like, I'm not a diary journal person, but tracking everything and like writing down symptoms that I'm feeling and, you know, different things. And then I flip back and now I can see patterns, but like it took me years to get to that point. So it's like, I just don't think there's a lot of education that comes with what your actual relationship with your period will be for that, you know, 30 years of your life.
Right.
Because, wow, it evolves. And I have way more respect for my period now than I did.
Right. Yeah, totally. And like how it is affected even by like what you're going through in your like your regular life, like career, school, whatever. But like periods of intense stress, you can lose your period or have a way worse one. Like, so even those like cycles that affect your sleep, like we were talking about. A
medication that you might be on that maybe impacts how intense your period is.
Or how you're sleeping, which then triggers, you know, intense ADHD symptoms. And then you're stressed because you have worse ADHD symptoms. So you have more cortisol, which like it's this like bullshit house of cards.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not as like the hormone fluctuations obviously are intense with your period. They're not as intense as they were during puberty, but it's like still impactful. I mean, it's still...
Yeah, it's this sort of thing where like once, like you said, once you're paying attention to it, it is so obvious that there are these changes happening.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you were saying earlier, like almost like a chicken and the egg thing. Was I just not paying attention to it because they told me it wasn't an excuse in 6th grade gym?
And it wasn't a big deal, and everybody deals with it.
Exactly. It's not an excuse. You'll feel better if you just do everything that the boys are doing.
Yes.
Is it that I wasn't paying attention to it because of that, or was I just not having those symptoms then?
Yeah.
Was I just trying to ignore it because I was struggling with my body changing and developing large breasts and hips and fitting into clothing that, or trying to find clothing that fit me, but also suited my personal style, and also discovering who I am as a person and things that I want.
So much.
Right. Like,
and you also think like, I guess I kind of figured, okay, when I'm in college, I'm going to have that shit figured out. And then you realize like, oh wait, no, just like I'm, you know, I have this evolving relationship with hormones throughout my life. Like everything's evolving all the time. Like I'm always changing a little bit. You know, my outlook on things is always changing a little bit. So the hindsight is really interesting because you think back and you're like, oh, wow. I used to think that people were being dramatic about their period. And now I am the drama. Now I get my period and I'm like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. We actually had tickets to something recently. And like, I knew my period was coming. And like that afternoon I got it. And I was like, whoa. oh, I really don't feel good. I'm like, no, I'm going to rally. And once I take a shower and like get myself, and I found something comfortable to wear, I'm like, I'll be fine. I can regroup. We were supposed to go get dinner and go out to this thing. And then I was like, let's just make dinner at home because that will be more comfortable.
Yeah.
And then it was literally like 15 minutes before we were supposed to leave. And I'm standing at the back door and I'm leaning against the countertop, like deep breathing. Because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to throw up or cry, right? And it was just like the cramps were just so intense. And again, I know I did not have cramps like that as a kid.
Right.
And finally my spouse was like, why don't you stay home? And I'm like, no, I'm gonna do it. He's like, or you can just lay on the couch and relax and I will take somebody else.
When they had to trick Leslie Knope.
Yes. Lock her in her
waffles.
office. Yes. You know what? Did you ever see When Harry Met Sally?
Yeah, of course. I love that movie.
So you know when they're on the phone and he's laying in bed and he's like, maybe I'll just lay here and moan?
Yeah.
So my spouse left and I laid on the couch with a heating pad for like an hour and I was just like, And you know what? I felt better after laying there. The heating pad like did eventually help.
And then Sally's like, you're not dying.
You're fine. But yeah, they are rough and you know, you see those places that start giving people time just for their period. Like they give them, 5 days or whatever. Reasonable because holy shit.
And that's the thing, like the thing with like you have a poop feeling, like you have to have a bowel movement every day, once a day. So you're used to that feeling. When that feeling is coming from the front half of your body, you're not used to that feeling.
And it doesn't go away.
And let's be clear, a period cramp is a contraction of your uterus. It is mimicking childbirth.
Between
that is the practice of it.
And your cervix is having to dilate to allow these clots to pass.
Yes.
And the vessels and all of the other shit that it's shedding. Woof.
Right. So like the pain exists for a reason, listener who might be unfamiliar with a period or what it feels
Although
like.
we don't know how you could be unfamiliar with periods after this episode.
I mean, Jesus Christ, this is basically a TED Talk.
It is. I mean, it's just like, I think my relationship with it has just changed so much in the last few years that I'm just so much more, it's just something I like didn't really give a shit about before because I didn't really deal with it.
Well, it was just
very hands off with it.
Accepted as part of life. And it was that thing of like, well,
pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Like that was my attitude with my period before.
Oh, totally.
Everybody was being dramatic. It's not that big a deal.
For
sure.
Now
I'm like, I need to take a sabbatical from work to recover from my last menstrual cycle.
Well, and it's that thing where also I think, especially in the past year since I had my ADHD diagnosis, and like we've talked about before, like setting myself up for success. So like those weeks doing like a meal kit delivery so that I don't have to think about what I'm cooking for dinner. I don't have to worry about measuring any ingredients or whatever. Right. I can just follow the instructions. At least 2 or 3 of my meals for the week are handled.
Right. Or you know what? My period's coming. I'm going to make a big pot of soup on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And then I can have that for a couple nights during the week and I don't have to worry about cooking.
For sure, yeah.
Or having a garbage plate. I'm going to have some mashed potatoes for dinner.
Yep. I did that the other night. It was so good.
Yeah.
I didn't drop it on my floor either.
Yes. Round of applause. Katie did not drop her food.
Oh, God, that was such a bad week. A bad week for my food.
Was that also a period week?
I don't know.
It probably was. That's also when I break things, too. I tend to, like, drop stuff a lot when I'm on my period.
Oh, my fucking cat knocked a glass off the counter last night as I... Yeah, of course it was. Cole doesn't get on the counter because he's a good boy. Sophie...
He's the goodest boy.
Yeah. Sophie is a crime against humanity.
She is. Katie sent me a picture of her the other day, and she does these emoji faces. I don't know how else to describe it. It was just the most, like, disgusted... She's a cat personality.
Yes.
She is like a caricature of a cat.
Yeah, she's Garfield.
Yes. Yes, she is, but just not orange.
Yeah, she knocked a cup. I had a glass of milk before I went to bed, and I had, like, laid in bed, and I was, like, just feeling
Katie was
myself
worried about
getting
her
tired.
bones.
Yeah, I've been craving milk lately, so whatever's in the milk my body is needing. I don't know. But your
bones are like, osteoporosis.
You're old.
Time to bulk up.
Um,
Those bones ready.
But I just I drank my milk and left the glass on the counter instead of putting it in the sink. And I'm like laying in bed. It's like 9:30, quarter to 10. And like, I'm just settling down. And I hear like a tink, tink. And I was like, okay, like she's probably on the counter doing something, like whatever. She explores when she's bored. My 1-bedroom apartment. And then all of a sudden I hear like tink tink shatter. And one of my nice glasses, it's a little 8-ounce glass, but it's like very fine, thin glass. She dropped off the kitchen counter onto the tile floor.
Oh my God, which means you have to then clean up glass at pre-bedtime.
Thank God I have my LL Bean slippers with the rubber bottoms.
Yeah.
But and a dustpan to like sweep it up. But like I said to PK, I was like, don't go into my kitchen because I haven't had a chance to like mop yet.
Yeah.
And like I still was finding after work the following day, like the sliver shards of like, because it's such fine glass, like I got a nice set of cups that I now don't have a full set of. But, that it's very fine glass, so like it didn't even shatter into slivers. It was like leaves of the layers of glass, and it was just so irritating. And I was like, this is just so annoying because I know it's the kind of thing that like it will like mini cut something or me or whatever. And then fucking Sophie, I go into the kitchen because I'm like, I get up because I'm like, I don't really leave glass around, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I do on my coffee table, but that's carpeted. Mm-hmm. So, like, my coffee table is not carpeted. The floor is. But I don't live in a bowling alley. But so if something were to fall in the living room, it wouldn't have made that noise, is my point. So it could only have happened in my bathroom or my kitchen. So...
And she knows that.
Yeah.
She's probably tested out every surface in the house.
Probably, yeah. And
you're not home, she's probably carrying a glass from one room and like dropping it to test.
She like calls the property manager from my computer and tells them to come clean up so that she doesn't get in trouble.
Probably makes Cole clean it up.
Probably. So yeah, I go into the kitchen and she like hops down, which freaked me out because I didn't want her to step on the glass and whatever. And then she runs out of the kitchen and her tail was all fluffy. Like she scared herself into puffing up and then laid in my foyer watching me clean it up.
Oh. The audacity.
I was fit to be tied. I was so mad.
Yeah, that would make her really
I sent a picture of the cup to PK and he's like, what is that? And I was like, a broken glass that your daughter broke.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's always when I break stuff. It always seems to be during my period.
I'm not on my period. And also Sophie isn't either because she's fixed.
I wonder if they still experience like any hormonal fluctuations or not.
I guess it would depend if they take out their ovaries with the uterus or not.
I don't know.
I assume they just take it all because, like, it's not like they need to preserve fertility.
Yeah. Like Harvey Weinstein's balls. We got it in another episode.
Flappy Doodles checking in.
Oh, our sound engineer is going to be so mad.
That's the sound of a Flappy Doodle.
Flapping against other Flappy Doodles. So yeah, we know that a lot of the studies that have been conducted are being conducted on male subjects. It has started to become a conversation with researchers, so they're hoping they can kind of get the ball rolling and really take a look at, with like hard science, that relationship between hormones, ADHD.
I wonder if that is coming a lot from like just the endocrinologist research community.
They have a couple doctors listed in here, but I don't know if they're Fox doctors or endocrinologists
or just word doctors or
just word doctors. I'm not really sure, but they are saying like, ultimately, if we're researching these things, it's going to like improve diagnostics, improve treatment, and it can like change cognitive behavioral, because like obviously these hormonal fluctuations are not going to be exclusive to ADHD. Like they're going to impact all kinds of different mental health, just mental health diagnoses. So
See
it's
last week's episode about SAD.
Yeah. Let's talk more about SAD. Sounds so depressing when we put it that way.
I know, but it sounds weird to say the SAD.
Yeah.
Like it's...
There's no good way to say it. And ultimately it is depressing because it is a form of depression.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the coverage, our introduction to this hormone conversation that's going to be ongoing. We covered some puberty and lots of period information. And
we also covered the gender wage gap.
We did. We did make sure to just yell at men for a few different reasons. And
so share this with a man that you want to shame.
And we mentioned Harvey Weinstein's balls. So really, we covered a lot of ground.
You talked about everything you wanted to talk about today.
I did. I hit all the hot topics. Yeah. And we mentioned Krampus. It was perfect. It was a perfect episode. So tune in next week. We are going to have a conversation about some more phases like pregnancy and perimenopause and menopause as it relates to ADHD and hormones. And like we said, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. We want to talk about things like PCOS, the impact of transitioning. And if there's something that we missed in this, or you want to hear about, or you want us to include in this continuing conversation, definitely let us know.
Yes, for sure use the website form for that, so that we can absolutely not lose it. And
yes.
Or what happens with Instagram is I take a screenshot and then I forget I have a screenshot.
Yeah. Or she sends it to me and then we both forget. Because we're like, if we send it, we'll remember. And other lies that we tell ourselves.
Yes.
So tune in next week. We're going to have some more conversation and meanderings about hormones, and potentially even the week after that. And like everything else, in addition to hormones, if there's anything else you want us to talk about, let us know.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll see you next week. Remember to be kind to yourself because hormones are intense and periods are hard. And the bar is ankle high.
Bye. Bye. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be here next Thursday with a brand new episode to delight your brain juices. In the meantime, the best way to support us is to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast streaming platform. You can keep up with us during the week on Instagram and Facebook at The Bar is Ankle High and on Twitter at Ankle High Pod. If you want even more Ankle High hot takes in your life and have a few dollars to spare, consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarIsAnkleHigh. We post bonus episodes there full of our karaoke attempts, Am I the Asshole discussions, and wondering how we even managed to survive this long. Patreon subscribers also get exclusive access to our secret Patreon-only Facebook group and get added to our close friends list on Instagram. Until next week, remember to be kind to yourself because the bar is ankle high.